Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. We are in our series called I'm Curious About ... Chanukah. Chanukah. So if you remember from part one, we said, what is Chanukah not? It's not the Jewish Christmas. Guess what? It's not about potato latkes. It's also not a biblical holiday. What does that mean? Well, let's just take, again, in terms of timing, it's important to understand a little bit of history. Approximately 160 plus years before the Common Era, meaning the Christian era, is when this process called Hanukkah began. Now, Hanukkah began as a revolt against religious oppression. It was a war by a small group of people against the most formidable army that existed at that time in that part of the world, which we call today the Middle East. So it's not a biblical holiday in the sense that the Bible, as known in the Jewish world, what was called the first 5 books of Moses, some call it the Old Testament, and all the writings of the prophets, and all the writings called the writings, called together the Bible, very large group of books, that was codified and canonized around the year 350 before the Common Era. So the biblical processes were already in place. So what happened now is relatively contemporary and outside the scope of what is called the Bible. But suffice it to say that it's certainly a Jewish holiday, and it was codified as a holiday in which we sing songs. We call it Hallel, which means hallelujah, means praise, and therefore it was instituted by the rabbis. Now, this is very important only because you have many Jews today, and certainly most Christians and Muslims and such, anybody who wants to know about Hanukkah, don't necessarily listen to the rabbis. And yet, Hanukkah is one of the most celebrated holidays in the Jewish calendar, even though it was instituted by the rabbis. So let's just talk about now what the word Hanukkah means. So in Hebrew, the language that, of course, is involved with Jews, Chanukah stands for 2 things. One is Chanukah, means they rested on the 25th. The 25th. Remember, say it's not the Jewish Christmas, and yet there is a relationship between the 25th of the month that is included in the month of Hanukkah, which is called Kislev, the name of the month. We can call it December if you want, but just the idea. And so the 25th of that month is when the Maccabeans, who revolted against the Syrian Greeks, because it was the Greeks who controlled that part of the world, just as, by the way, it was the Greeks, descendants of Alexander, who also controlled Egypt. Egypt was ruled by Greek power for hundreds and hundreds of years until the Romans came along. It was very rarely ever an Egyptian state, as it were. And it was the small group of Maccabeans, who are today enshrined as the Maccabee Games because they were strong warriors who were successful, revolted against the dominant power in that part of the world, who were oppressing them religiously. This is really important. They weren't there to kill Jews, unlike the terrible people or beings, they're not people even, during the time of the Third Reich. They were merely not allowing Jews to observe religious holidays, such as circumcision, the celebration of the new moon. Now, this is important because in part 3, we're going to talk about women's rights, and women's rights are especially related to the new moon. So it was the revolt of the Maccabeans, and they rested after a 7-year war and won against this formidable enemy. On the rest of the 25th, they were able to go back into Jerusalem, into the Holy Temple. Yes, the temple did exist on the Temple Mount. It's not a figment of anybody's imagination. And to begin the cleanup process. That was a miracle. And also, interesting enough, the word Chanukah stands for chinuch. Hey, now chinuch means to teach. And Hey has to do with the idea of the letter Hey in the Hebrew alphabet with God. So it's the ability to teach about God in our lives. Yes, God is a major factor in the history of the Jews and therefore the history of the world, because we do believe that the Bible's opening statement, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, is a true statement. But go back and finish up with this second part of Hanukkah. So Hanukkah itself, the word, has two different meanings and even more. But the point is that it has to do with teaching, it has to do with observing, and it has to do with the 25th, and it has to do with a great miracle. There are several miracles in Hanukkah. One of them is war, success, victory. Yay, team. So we'll talk about in part 3 women's rights and how important women were in the Hanukkah story. So stay tuned. And our blessing to you is go forth, light those candles, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad, go make a difference, just like the Maccabees did, and to this very day.